Hello and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, wedding bells are ringing. For the last several episodes, we've been trying to get to a wedding, Elvis Presley's wedding, and we're almost there. Today we're going to make it, I think. Hi TT, hi Luann, hi Gunn, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you all here. Hi Colleen. We're going to get started with a song like we usually do. And this is an original song that I wrote and used AI to bring to life that tells us what Elvis was really looking for when he was trying to get married. And that's his heart's desire. And when we come back from the song, we're going to go to a wedding.
His time came too early, the curtain fell too fast. Before he was ready, before we could grasp the man behind the myth, the ache behind the fame. He wanted something simple, not fortune, not acclaim. 6 is 3, the threats came down like rain. He spoke of love, not fear, through the shadow and the strain. I wanna live to be old, he said with quiet grace, to remember her love and see our children's face. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home, to be a good man with a heart that could rest, to know he was loved and he'd given in his best. No mansion in the sky, no diamond parade, just the warmth of a hand and the life they made. A whisper of laughter, a child's sleepy sigh, that was the dream he carried inside. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home, to be a good man with a heart that could rest, to know he was loved and he'd given his best.
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're going to hear the echoes of wedding bells that are ringing. But I'd like to start by welcoming TT's ASMR to the broadcast. TT is a fellow YouTube creator who specializes in ASMR, so she searches for sounds that bring pleasure and relaxation. And she's got a new channel that she started. So if any of you are interested in ASMR, you should definitely check her out. She's very into the sounds themselves. And I find her work to be very relaxing. I don't even know if TT is actually interested in Elvis, but I did invite her to the channel, and she's been kind enough to join us here and listen to some Elvis stories. And what I think is that the Elvis stories that we share here are beautiful, and that she will hopefully find them entertaining, even though she may not know as much as about Elvis as many of us do. And today we're going to get back into this wedding. Now, in the last episode, we got through the party that they had the day before the wedding. And they had snuck out of the house, and they got on a Lear jet. Elvis and Priscilla and some of a few selected members of their party got on a Lear jet that was owned by Frank Sinatra, and it was flown by another celebrity who was Danny Kaye, who was famous at that time and had a television show. So Danny flew Frank Sinatra's plane with Elvis Presley and Priscilla and some of his dear friends, including George Klein, who was a famous radio DJ out of Memphis and a lifelong friend of Elvis Presley. And they flew to Las Vegas. And that's where we're going to pick this story up. Dee Presley, who is the stepmother of Elvis Presley, she is married to Vernon Presley, who is Elvis's father. And Vernon handles all of the business for Elvis, all the personal business. He handles the checkbook. He makes sure that the money's in the bank accounts, takes care of all the paperwork for all the cars that Elvis owns and the houses, and handles all of the office work and making sure that the fan mail gets answered. This is his wife, the woman that he married after Gladys Presley, the person that Elvis loved more than anybody in the world. After she passed away in 1958, Vernon married Dee Presley in 1960. And we're now at the wedding of Elvis and Priscilla in 1967. Dee Presley said, "The press was everywhere, and we had to sneak out to the airport to fly to Vegas for the wedding." And Priscilla says, "As a wedding present, Elvis flew in my mom and dad from his new post at Fort Ord, California. I remember how overwhelmed they were, how happy too. Of course, they thought it was time. We had been dating for years." So Priscilla, some people have wondered whether her parents were at the wedding. Now we know that they were flown in. Her father was in the military, in the Air Force. It was her stepfather, but he was in the military. And so he was stationed in California. And Elvis has flown him and his wife to Las Vegas, as well as Priscilla's brother and sister. And Chillin in Canada says that she thinks it would be very exciting to attend a secret wedding, late night hop over a wall to avoid paparazzi, and then hop on a jet to Vegas. And Elvis history is identifying himself as Terry. Terry is a wonderful individual, TT, who also has an Elvis channel. So if you like Elvis history, definitely check out Elvis history. Marty Lacker, who is a friend of Elvis's, and who is the co-best man, along with Joe Esposito. Now Marty's been in a little trouble recently, and that's how he kind of got demoted into the co-best man position, because at one point, he was the only best man. But Marty says about 4 that morning, Elvis and Priscilla, escorted by Joe and a security man, were taken to the Las Vegas courthouse, where a license was issued. And Joe Esposito says, at the Las Vegas airport, another car was waiting to take us to the courthouse to fill out papers for the marriage license. Now, Joe's worked with Elvis since 1960. He's what they call the foreman. Everybody in the Memphis Mafia, they kind of report to him. And recently, there's been a bit of a kerfuffle, and things have been shaken up a little bit by Colonel Parker, and those who are under Joe have been ordered to report to Joe and not to take their problems directly to Elvis. That happened about a month and a half before this wedding. Joe Esposito goes on to say, I paid the $15 fee for the marriage license because Elvis wasn't carrying money. Then he went to the Aladdin so Elvis and Priscilla could rest before the wedding. So Elvis doesn't even have $15 to pay for his marriage license, but luckily Joe's there. Joe's got the money. So they get the license and they head on back to the hotel. It's the Aladdin. And Elvis and Priscilla, they're going to rest and get dressed before the wedding. Priscilla says, we knew that once we applied for a marriage license, the news would flash around the world. It actually was only a few hours after we got our license that Rona Barrett's office began calling to ask if rumors about the marriage were true. Now we know that Rona Barrett, she's been on this story since they were back in Palm Springs. And she tracked down George Klein and somebody else at a convenience store and tried to get them to tell her that Elvis was getting married. But nobody would tell her. And now they've flown over to Las Vegas. So gossip column, that's what Rona does. She's a gossip columnist. She's probably very upset because they've given her the slip. However, the colonel did tell all of the reporters to be at the Aladdin Hotel at 1 p.m. on the following day. That's this day, May 1st, 1967. Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Now here we can see the actual marriage certificate. So they went and they got the license. And eventually it's going to lead to this certificate right after the ceremony. The Justice David Zinoff, who has signed, who you can see his name here, and then he signed down at the bottom, although it's hard to see. He's going to fill this all out. And it's actually got a date of May 5th, 1967 on it. So they don't even fill this out for another few days. But since this is the Signed, Sealed, and Remembered series, which is supposed to be about contracts and documents and such, and we've gotten a little away from that during this long Circle G period of 1967. This is a document I definitely wanted to bring out so that we could all see. And I believe it says that it's the first day of May 1967 at the top. And then they've just filed this all on May 5th. That is at the bottom. But that's the actual document which is going to finalize this marriage. This is the Aladdin Hotel. in Las Vegas, no longer there, been gone for a long, long time. You can see the sign says the Jackie Mason Show, who was, I believe he was a comedian. And this is the casino that was owned by Milton Prell. It's not nearly as magnificent as you thought it was. Because if you think about Vegas today, you think of these gigantic, enormous buildings. And that's what you're thinking. Elvis went to one of these hotels. No, it was this fairly modest structure. This is where it happened. And Luann says that at one point she had read that Elvis wasn't too fond of going up in planes. That's both true and not true. He was very excited about it when he first got to do it. And that was in the late 1950s. And then when he needed to take a plane, because in 1956 and 1957 he became extremely famous. And now he's flitting all over the United States. And he would need to travel quickly. It would just take too long by car or train. He started taking these small prop planes. Back then, the air industry wasn't nearly as developed as it is now. So you couldn't really hop a plane easily, a commercial plane from one part of the country to the other. They just didn't have that network up yet. You could get some big planes to some big cities, but if you needed to get somewhere else, and if you needed something on your own time and not the schedule of the airports or the airlines, you had to charter these planes, and they were small. They'd usually sit like 6 or 8 people. And Elvis got up in one of these, and there was a couple of different occasions. One time they ran out of fuel. One time they had some kind of mechanical issues. And Elvis pretty much decided, because Gladys was very frightened for him, his mother, that he would be killed in a plane wreck. And then there were some rock and rollers killed in plane wrecks. He just decided to stop flying at that point. And he was very nervous about it. And then you get into the 70s. And he ends up buying the Lisa Marie. So there comes a point where he becomes comfortable again with flying. But by the time comes, he personally checks out every pilot. Like, he likes to talk to the pilots. And he likes to know, just the same way that he likes to talk to police officers. But he likes to talk to the pilot. And he likes to make sure that they sound like they know what they're doing. And he respects their authority and their knowledge quite a bit. But what he doesn't do is get into small planes ever again. But here at the Aladdin Hotel, Elvis dressed for the wedding ceremony. Now, if you remember our episode from yesterday, and if you missed it, be sure to go back into the archive to check it out. It's under the live section on the channel. But if you remember yesterday, Billy Smith, who is Elvis's cousin, one of his favorite people in the world, Elvis loves Billy Smith. And Billy Smith is actually the very last person, other than Ginger Alden, Elvis's girlfriend, who ever saw Elvis alive. The last member of his family who saw him alive. Billy Smith was in charge of Elvis's shoes for the wedding. He had a pair of patent black leather shoes that were supposed to go with this custom tuxedo that he had. Of course, Billy's in charge of all the shoes, because Elvis isn't going to wear black patent leather shoes all weekend. Or for the week, or however long it is. Billy needs to have all the shoes. And Billy makes it out to Palm Springs and realizes he doesn't have the shoes, but he does have a pair of 3/4 high suede boots. And he attempts to make them look like patent leather shoes with a brush and some shoe polish. Now, we discussed this, and it's not a good idea with suede. And you're not going to look like a patent leather shoe. You're not going to fool anybody with this shoe. So Elvis is getting dressed, and Billy Smith is sitting there watching him, and he's just in dread because it's getting closer and closer to where Elvis is going to need to put his shoes on. You know, he's got his pants on, he's got his shirt on, he's put his cummerbund on, he's got his jacket, his tie, his socks. He's going to need these shoes in a second. And Elvis starts looking around for these black patent leather shoes, but they're not there. And Billy just kind of slips over the 3/4 high boots that are suede and that he's polished, hoping that Elvis just is so excited he'll put them on and not notice they're not the right shoes. And here's the way Billy tells the story. Billy says, Elvis said, "You forgot them, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah." Elvis said, "They're not going to be looking at my feet much, no way." And Elvis wore those 3/4 high suede polished to look like patent leather boots. Now, the pictures that I have, I'm not able to see these boots, so I think maybe Elvis is right. Nobody's paying any attention to his shoes, but I'm sure it was a little bit of a disappointment for him, as he was looking so good in that tux, but he doesn't have the right shoes. And Marty Lacker says, "When I dressed in the morning, I went into Elvis's suite to see if I could help with anything. He was there with Harry Levitch, a Memphis jeweler from whom Elvis bought most of his jewelry. He had delivered the wedding ring to Las Vegas." So in the last episode, we saw some receipts that Harry had brought, and we tried to identify some of those pieces. But Harry's also brought the wedding ring. And when Marty's saying that he's brought the wedding ring, I'm assuming that means he's brought Elvis's wedding ring. But I kind of have to assume it means Priscilla's as well. So I would think he's brought both wedding rings. Marty's only mentioning one, so I'm not sure. In this picture, which was taken before the wedding, we can see Elvis in his tux. We can't see his shoes, so we can't verify this Billy story, but we can see Elvis in his tux. Next to Elvis, on the left side of the picture, there's a slightly balding gentleman, and he's got a bow tie. He's obviously wearing the ruffled tux shirt as well, so he's in a tux. That is Marty Lacker. He's the one that just told us that he went into this room, and this is the story that he's telling us. He walked in here. George Klein is in here. He's on the other side of Elvis with the skinny tie. Elvis has flown him in from Memphis to Palm Springs, and then Elvis brought him on Frank Sinatra's Learjet to Las Vegas with him. And we'll skip the older gentleman because we can see Charlie Hodge at the far right. He's got the skinny tie. This is Elvis's lifelong friend Charlie, lives at Graceland. It's been with Elvis since 1960 when they both returned from the Army together. He's a famous singer on his own, was part of another group, and sometimes he goes out and performs on his own, but mostly he sticks with Elvis, and in the 1970s, he'll be on stage performing with Elvis in all of his concerts. And the man that is between George Klein and Charlie Hodge, that is Harry Levitch. That's the jeweler. That's the guy that brought the wedding ring. possibly both wedding rings. He's got a suitcase full of jewelry, and Elvis is going to purchase some of it during this wedding to hand out to people, because Elvis likes to give a lot of gifts. And Marion's asking if there's any pictures of the wedding shoes. Well, as we go through these pictures, we'll take a look and see if we can identify any that have the shoe. I don't think that there are. I think that most of these are snapshots, and they're mostly from the waist up, but we'll see. This is Elvis and his father, Vernon. Well, we can see some shoes here. I don't think the clarity of the picture will allow us to determine if those are patent leather shoes or not, but they're not shiny. You can see that there's a slight shine on Vernon's shoes when I'm not talking. But that's Vernon and Elvis dressed for the wedding, getting ready to go get Elvis hitched for the first time. Vernon's been through this twice. Now, Vernon's first wedding, of course, wasn't in a church. He went to the Justice of the Peace. And in the second wedding, I think they had it in a house. I cannot remember where he and Dee got married off the top of my head. I think it was more formal than when he and Gladys got married. But Vernon has a big smile on his face. Elvis looks like he has a forced smile on his face in this particular picture. But Vernon looks very happy. And Gunn says that Charlie was good for Elvis, and that she likes George Klein too, and Colleen also likes Charlie. I think Charlie was probably a good guy. I don't know of anything really terrible that Charlie ever did, other than tell some lewd jokes. Now, I have heard that he was a little handsy with some women. I heard that from a couple of women. But it wasn't ever enough that it reached into all the books or the movies or anything, so I don't know. But I've always thought he was a nice guy. And TT says that this is neat. Thank you so much, TT. I'm glad you're having a good time, especially if you don't know much about Elvis. But I try to bring us a full story to make it feel like we're really there. And that in this case, we're actually at the wedding. We're one of the guests. And Luann says that Elvis always had Charlie Hodge laughing on stage or anywhere. And that they would all join in the laughs. Yes, Charlie was a funny individual. If you liked his sense of humor, he was very, very funny. And after Elvis passed away, he did have a fairly lengthy career it was like a dinner theater kind of environment, and he would just tell stories about Elvis, about him and Elvis. Okay, we're going to be getting to the ceremony here. Now, there is, I don't seem to have it within my pictures, but there is another receipt. And maybe it was only referenced, and that's why I may not have a picture of this. But it was from Harry Levitch for another one of those receipts, like we saw in a previous video. And this one was for a 14 gold Ivy Wed charm, which was $40, which in today's money would be about $400. There was a man's diamond wedding ring for $140, which is about $1,400 today. I don't think that is Elvis's wedding ring. I think that's a ring for not necessarily the groom's ring. I'm not really sure. But the next one is platinum double guard ring, which I think is Elvis's wedding ring. And it's 2.04 carats. So it's a lot of diamonds are it's not one diamond. It's a whole bunch of little diamonds, but it's a lot of them to reach 2 carats. And it was $1,400, which today would be like $14,000. So I'm fairly certain this is Elvis's ring that is being reflected in the receipt that was mentioned in this other source material. And Luann says that she was joining in when she heard Elvis and Charlie cracking up and having laughs. And Gunn says, wasn't Charlie giving him the scarves too? Yes, Charlie gave him the scarves. Charlie handed him the guitars, but those were the least of what Charlie was actually doing. Charlie's job was to communicate between Elvis and the band and the orchestra. So Elvis had his own band, which was, I think, 5 pieces. I'm thinking 4 or 5 pieces. There was a lead guitar, a rhythm guitar, a bass guitar, drums. That's 4. And I can't remember if there was a 5th instrument. But the orchestra, I think, was 30 pieces. And it was run by another person, because it was really the hotel's orchestra. It might have been more than 30 pieces. I know that they cut it to some size to tour, but they had the full orchestra there. So somebody had to communicate what songs were going to be sung. There was also 2 other voice groups, because there was always a gospel group, and there was always a sweet inspiration type group. So Charlie coordinated between all of that before show. And then Elvis would make calls during the middle of the show to go to different songs. And because Charlie had communicated these things well, they were all able to flip to whatever song this was. They knew what they needed to do with that song, in other words. And if there was a song that it was felt hadn't been practiced enough, they rarely practiced. Well, then that's when Charlie would step forward and practice with everybody, even though Elvis wasn't there or whatever. And that's kind of what Charlie was doing. He was the stage manager. He doesn't really get the recognition for that title much, but he was doing significant work on that show, although some people think it was only water bottles and scarves, but he was very important. Plus, he helped Elvis choose the songs that they were going to put in the pot, basically, that they could then pick from to play every night. And Chillin in Canada says, Elvis's wedding ring. He had a horseshoe-shaped ring designed for the wedding, which was made by Harry Levitch. The ring was platinum and featured 24 diamonds. Well, that might be that horseshoe-shaped ring then, because the wedding ring is not a horseshoe-shaped ring, but I do know I've seen that one that you're talking about. And then Luann's saying that she took notice of Elvis in 1972 at age 11. And she's learning that he's so interesting on and off the stage. And Colleen is saying that in this very photo we're looking at, he has the horseshoe ring on. And he does. Look at that. Good eyes, Colleen. I can barely see that. This is a really good picture of the ceremony. And you can see Elvis's, I think they call that brocade on his tux. It's kind of almost a paisley kind of design. He and Marty Lacker picked out that fabric so that Elvis's tux would not be the same as anybody else's tux. And then it was custom made by a tailor at the studio. And Chillin's saying that she maximized the picture to be able to take a look at the ring. Well, good thinking. But yeah, I can see that that is the horseshoe ring. And so we can see Priscilla and the gown that she is wearing. There's going to be a description of the gown coming up. And we can see Elvis in his tux, and his hair is looking great. And we can see just the bare side. I'm fairly certain this is the judge. who was on the Nevada Supreme Court. So this is a very important person. But he's come to marry Elvis, and he's the one who signed that certificate that we looked at a minute ago. And here we've got another picture of the actual service. Now, my question in this picture is, we can see Elvis. He's looking pretty good here. We can see Priscilla, and she has eyes only for Elvis in this picture. I mean, she is just adoring him in this picture. We can see George Klein, who looks terrible in this picture for some reason. His eyes are just deeply shaded. I don't know if the late night jaunt from Palm Springs to Vegas and the flight before that has just done him in, or he hasn't slept since the moment he got on the plane from Memphis. But he's looking rough in this picture. Of course, we can't depend on the colors in any of these pictures. We've seen that in previous episodes, that depending on how it comes through on your screen and who originally put it up and what filters they put on it. But George looks either sick or tired, I think. And then the man beside George, who is that? Like, I do not recognize this. At first I thought it was Billy Smith, but it's not Billy. So I think it must be Priscilla's brother. I think his name is Donnie. I don't have it right here in front of me, but I think that's her brother. So if you know who that is, let me know. And Pat says it looks like George has black eyes. Yeah, I know. It's got to be something about the way they've done the color in this picture, but I do believe his eyes did not look good that day. And I'm guessing he hadn't slept in 48 plus hours. And Marion's, did he have his nose done right before the wedding? No, he'd had it done years before. But it does give you that impression, right? And Luann's saying she's never seen markings like that around someone's eyes. I really think it's the way that they filtered this picture, that it's pulled these other colors out. But I think if you had seen George in person that day, you definitely would have noticed that something was going on with his eyes. George Klein says, Elvis had named Joe Esposito and Marty Lacker to be co-best men, and he wanted me to be there too, as a witness to the wedding vows. I felt privileged to be included. This has been a wonderful weekend for George. Or whatever days this is. I should have looked up the actual days, right? But this is a wonderful period of time for George, the last few days. He's been whisked away on a plane. I think he came probably with Vernon and the others, and he's come to Palm Springs, but maybe he came on a different plane. But then he spent time at Elvis's house in Palm Springs. He was there, I'm sure, for that party that we looked at. And then he gets onto Frank Sinatra's jet. Now he's here at this wedding. I mean, this, with the greatest superstar in the world, this is a great time for George. And he's been privileged the whole time. And he's felt that way. He's one of the few guys in the story that talks about how privileged he feels to have even been close to the wedding. And Marty Lacker says, Mr. Levitch had his jewelry cases with him, and Elvis chose a set of cufflinks and a tie clasp for me as a gift for being best man. Because of the ranch, they were the shape of a bull's head with diamonds set as eyes. He also gave a set to Joe. They were handsome, expensive pieces of jewelry. So Harry Levitch, he has been able to sell something out of these suitcases of jewelry that he's carrying. And it's a set of a tie clasp and cufflinks that are the shape of a bull's head with diamonds. And it's because Elvis is thinking about the Circle G. And of course, we've been doing this whole series because we know that the Circle G is very important to Elvis. He saw that cross up on that hill, and he knew he was following the right path, and he purchased the Circle G, and he was ripped away from it to come back to the commercial crassness of the movie Clam Bake, which turned out to be not that terrible a movie, but Elvis did have a concussion right before he made it. He's had these struggles and turmoil coming into this wedding, and he's hoping to leave this wedding and go back to the Circle G, to the house and the trailers and the little village that he's built there to start his family. And this is the first step towards that, is finalizing this marriage. But he's thinking about it because he gives both Joe and Marty these pieces of jewelry that look like a bull, which is the cattle that's being raised on the ranch, like in the background that we're watching. And Pat's saying that none of the MM guys, the Memphis Mafia, were invited to the wedding. Am I right? Well, we're going to find out, Pat. We're going to find out. Priscilla Presley, she says, I had never attended a wedding as large as ours. Nothing even close. I was nervous. Well, how big is this wedding? How many people are here? Priscilla's saying it's the largest one she's ever been to. She's never even attended one this big. Dee Presley says, the crafty Colonel, and the Colonel is Colonel Parker. He's Elvis's manager. He handles all of the media and setting up the contracts and what movies they're going to do, if they're going to give a performance, where it's going to be at, stuff like that. But Dee Presley says the crafty Colonel handled all the arrangements and orchestrated the press masterfully throughout. So Dee thought the Colonel did a good job at all this. She was fairly impressed. Priscilla says, we, meaning her and Elvis, we were particularly upset at the way our friends and relatives ended up being shuffled around. So Priscilla indicates that there were problems in paradise here, that all was not perfect. And Jerry Schilling, who is Elvis's, I wouldn't say his youngest friend, but I would say the youngest of the original inner circle friends. Elvis brings him in after everybody else because Jerry is younger than everybody else. Jerry originally played football with Elvis in 1954 when Jerry was 12 and Elvis was 18 or 19 and was just starting to hit it big and just recorded his first record, had become overnight popular in Memphis, and yet no one knew his face. So no one wanted to play football with him. So Red said, hey, Jerry, you want to play? And Jerry played. And then when Elvis came back from the army and Jerry was in college, he offered Jerry a job. Jerry took it. And later on, he'll eventually buy Jerry a house in California that Jerry still lives in and still owns. And Marion says that she always thought the wedding was very small. Too many people left out. And Pat says to her it was a speedy wedding. And Guns agreeing she thought it was a small wedding too. And Luann's saying that Priscilla could be stating the wedding's big due to the high entertainment people that are present. In other words, the big stars are what make the wedding big. That's a good thought, Luann. That could be. But Jerry Schilling, here's what he says. The Colonel did not hesitate to run the show. His idea of a smooth event was one in which the guys were minimally involved. In fact, when the whole entourage finally got to the site of the wedding, the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas, the Memphis Mafia found itself disinvited. So Jerry is agreeing that the Memphis Mafia was not at the wedding. Dee Presley, she says the wedding itself, which took place on the morning of May 1st, 1967, was very private and intimate. There were only 14 people in attendance, and some of Elvis's companions had been conspicuously not informed of what was going on. So Dee has a perspective, and her perspective is that there were 14 people there in the wedding. Dee is not correct. There were more than 14 people. We might end up adding it up ourselves to figure out how many, but there's at least 18 that I've been able to count so far. But it's not everybody. It's very few compared to the number who have arrived for the event. But it is more than 14. And Dee says that these other people aren't there because they weren't informed of what was going on. Well, that's not exactly true either. They were informed. And TT says that she's been listening while driving. Thank you so much, TT. I appreciate you sticking with us. Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate seeing you. And George Klein, he says, when most of the other guys heard that they would only be at the reception and not the actual wedding, there were a lot of hurt feelings. Now, if we look at this picture that we're looking at right now, we can see that George, well, he's not left out of this wedding. He's there. He's one of these 14 plus people that Dee Presley saw at the wedding. Dee's there. George is there. His feelings aren't hurt. Priscilla says, the Colonel even told some of the boys that the room was too small to hold most of them and their wives, and that there wasn't time to change to a bigger room. Unfortunately, by the time Elvis found out, it was too late for him to do anything about it. Priscilla says, whatever happened, it was the Colonel's fault. That Elvis did not determine to keep these people out of his wedding. That the Colonel determined these people would not be there because the room was too small. Marty Lacker, co-best man. So Priscilla, she's at the wedding, obviously. She's not missing out on anything. Marty Lacker, he's not missing out on anything either. He's co-best man, so he's here at the wedding. He says everything necessary had now been done. So I said to Joe, well, I better go tell the guys to get ready. It was then that Joe informed me that none of the guys would be at the ceremony. So Marty says this wasn't his idea either. Joe told him how it was going to be. As far as he knows, it was Joe Esposito. Marty goes on. I was upset because I knew how hurt the guys would be. After all the years we had been together as a group, it seemed incredible that they were to be excluded. The reason given was that there wouldn't be enough room in the suite where the ceremony was to be held. But as it turned out, there was plenty of room. Marty tells us that whatever room this was in his estimation, he thinks they could have shoved all these other people in there. He feels they could have got everybody in. He doesn't think that the reason given was sufficient for these people not to have been there. And Jerry Schilling says, myself, Red West, Alan Fortas. Now, Alan Fortas is Elvis's friend that he's put in charge of the Circle G. He's the ranch manager. So he's come from Memphis at the Circle G to be at this wedding. The others were, I think they were already there because of Clam Bake. Like, Clam Bake ended on the 27th of April. This is the 1st, a few days later. Everybody's just hung around, and now they've been flown over to Vegas, and they're there for the wedding. But Jerry says, myself, Red West, Alan Fortas, Richard Davis, and our wives were expected to turn up only at the reception. Larry Geller was not even invited to that. Now that's odd that Jerry says that Larry Geller was not invited to the reception. Because Larry told us that the day before Elvis got married, he called the house, Elvis's house, and Jerry answered. And Jerry told Larry, get over to the house right now, we're all going to Vegas. And Larry said, I'm not coming, I don't want to be there, I don't want to... Larry did not know that Elvis was going to get married. But Larry had determined to break from the group, and he didn't want to be employed by Elvis anymore. So he just determined not to come back. And he basically told Jerry he wasn't coming back. He didn't tell Elvis. He didn't get through to Elvis. He just told Jerry he wasn't coming back. But Jerry tried, according to Larry, to convince Larry to come, which would indicate that Larry was indeed invited to the reception. And most likely his wife would have been invited to the reception as well. If he'd come to the house, and then he would have heard what was going on, and he could have got the wife over there. But Jerry's actually stating that Larry Geller wasn't invited. That does not jive with Larry's story. So I don't know who to believe. Or maybe the truth is somewhere there in the middle. And Gunn says, why marry at a hotel in the first place? That's a good question. But according to Joe Esposito, Elvis told the Colonel he wanted to get married in Vegas, and obviously the place that you're going to get married in Vegas is at a hotel. And Elvis told the Colonel to make the arrangements. That's what Joe Esposito says. Priscilla says one person who had been very upset was Red West. He had not been invited to the wedding ceremony in the suite, only to the reception afterward. I believe the reason Red was so hurt was because Elvis did not demand that he be present, and he did not take a stand over Colonel Parker's decision that only the immediate family and best man attend. I also believe that Red wanted to be best man. After all, he'd known Elvis the longest since their days at Hume's High. When Red found out he could not watch the ceremony, he refused to come at all. So Priscilla's saying that in her judgment, she thought Red West would be best man. And so it was crazy to her that he's not at the wedding. Now we're going to find out things later about what does this mean that you're not invited to the wedding. I'm going to get more into that in the next episode. But we've come to the end of today's episode because we're going to run out of time before we can get into the next set of stories, which is really going to be how Red reacts to this. And Emma says that she thinks the Colonel arranged the wedding and was friends with the owner. That is true. The Colonel was friends with Milton Prell, and that's how they arranged it at this hotel. But Elvis had told him, according to Joe, I want to get married in Vegas. And Anna, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Anna says that she knows that we're almost over, but she wanted to say hello to everyone. And I'm happy that you came in and did. And RL says Elvis is the best. Hi, RL. I don't think I've ever seen you comment before in the chat, so good to see you. Welcome to the show. And Terry says this was a fantastic live stream. Thank you so much, Terry. I really appreciate it. And we're going to go out of here like we do every time on a song. And Emma says that she didn't know some of this stuff that we've gone over today in the video. Thank you so much, Emma. And Gunn says that the wedding is unexpected in many ways. So I hope that means that you've been surprised by some of the things we've already brought out, and the ceremony isn't even over yet. And Luann saying that between Red West and Jerry Schilling, there were a lot of longtime friends to pick which one was the best man. And according to Joe, it was Marty because Marty was the flavor of that month. And then Elvis tired of Marty after that and then chose Joe to be best man. And it was Joe that said, no, Marty has to be co-best man too. Now, I don't know how much truth there is to that, but that's what he said. But I'm going to send you guys out of here on a song. And this song will be Cross on the Circle, where it all started. And that why Elvis bought the Circle G. And until I see you all again, you all keep on taking care of business.
He saw the cross at dawn and said, it's a good omen. Never dream again. At the break of dawn, through the window pane, he saw a cross in morning rain, white as grace, tall as prayer, calling him to build and share. Not a kingdom, not a throne, but a place of love alone, where laughter rides on horse's breath and peace outshines the fear of death. Come home to the circle and the sign, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, just a handshake and a name. Come home where the cross stands tall. Come and share the love of all. Mobile homes and barbecue nights, trucks and trout and porch light rides. He handpicked hard to share the dream, a mythic village by the stream. This is more than land, it's grace, refuge carved in sacred space, a gift of love to friends and kin, protected from the world's loud din. Come home to the circle and the sign, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, just a handshake and a name. Come Come and share